Right now, somewhere in your home, there's probably a wallet, a card, or a phone that can move money with a single tap. You barely think about it. You trade minutes of your life for numbers on a screen, and those numbers can become food, shelter, or safety. But the real story of why this works is far stranger than you've been told. Money isn't just a tool for trade, it's a solution to a problem your ancestors couldn't survive without solving. Here's the story most people learn in school. Long ago, humans supposedly relied on barter. A farmer with extra wheat would trade directly with a toolmaker who needed food. Then, the story goes, money was invented to make barter easier. It sounds logical. It's also, according to most anthropological evidence, almost entirely a myth. Anthropologist Caroline Humphrey studied dozens of pre-monetary societies searching for evidence of pure barter economies, communities running on direct goods-for-goods trade with no money involved. Her conclusion was blunt. No example has ever been found of a barter economy operating as the primary system of exchange. Not one. So if early humans weren't trading turnips for tools, what were they actually doing? The answer is something almost more human than trade itself. Debt, not formal loans with interest rates and paperwork, but memory, social memory. In small communities, if you needed grain and your neighbor had extra, they simply gave it to you. No immediate exchange happened. Instead, an invisible ledger formed in everyone's mind. You owed them. Not a specific amount necessarily, but a general sense of obligation. This system worked beautifully in small groups. Everyone knew everyone. Reputations were tracked constantly, almost unconsciously, the way you might remember which friend still owes you a favor. Anthropologists call this system generalized reciprocity, and it functioned as a kind of primitive social currency long before physical currency existed. But here's the problem. This system only works at a small scale. Once a community grows beyond the number of people your brain can meaningfully track relationships with, informal debt breaks down. Researchers studying social cognition, building on work by evolutionary psychologist Robin Dunbar, have proposed that the human brain can only maintain a stable number of meaningful social relationships, often estimated around 150. Beyond that threshold, memory-based trust simply cannot scale. Imagine two total strangers meeting at a market. No shared history, no mutual friends monitoring the exchange, no social pressure keeping either person honest. If one gives away goods on the promise of future repayment, there's no guarantee the other will ever return the favor. This is where things get dangerous, not physically, but socially and economically. Trust, the invisible infrastructure that debt depends on, simply doesn't exist between strangers. This is the exact problem money was built to solve. Instead of relying on memory or trust, money externalizes the ledger. A coin, a shell, a piece of paper. It doesn't matter what the object is, only that both people agree it represents value. The stranger doesn't need to trust you. They only need to trust the object changing hands. This explains why some of history's earliest forms of money weren't gold or silver at all. In parts of ancient China, cowrie shells functioned as currency. In colonial North America, wampum, crafted from shell beads, served a similar purpose. In some regions of the Pacific, enormous carved stone discs called rye stones represented wealth so large they were sometimes never physically moved. Ownership simply transferred through community agreement, an idea documented extensively by economist Milton Friedman in his study of the Micronesian island of Yap. What made all of these objects valuable wasn't scarcity alone, it was shared belief. A kind of collective agreement that this object represents value, even though the object itself might be nearly worthless on its own. This is where money starts to feel less like a physical invention and more like a psychological one. A dollar bill has no nutritional value. You can't build shelter from it. Its material worth is close to nothing. And yet billions of people around the world treat it as something worth working, saving, and sometimes even risking their lives for. Neuroscientists have found that anticipating a monetary reward activates similar brain regions as anticipating food or other primal survival rewards, according to research on the neuroscience of reward processing. In other words, your brain doesn't fully distinguish between the biological drive for sustenance And the psychological drive for numbers on a screen. Money essentially hijacks ancient survival circuitry and repurposes it for an abstract modern invention. This might explain something you've probably felt but never fully understood. Losing money doesn't just feel inconvenient, it feels threatening, almost like a survival level alarm going off. Behavioral economists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky documented this phenomenon in what's now called loss aversion, the finding that losses register roughly twice as intensely in the human brain as equivalent gains. Losing $100 doesn't just cancel out the pleasure of gaining $100. It hurts significantly more. Your brain, in a very real sense, treats financial loss the way it once treated the loss of food or shelter, resources your ancestors' survival directly depended on. Which brings us to something deeply counterintuitive. Money was never really about the physical objects at all. Shells, stones, metal coins, paper bills, and digital numbers on a screen are simply different containers for the same underlying invention. What money actually represents is trust, extended across distance and time, between people who might never personally know each other. Before money, trust had to be personal. It lived in memory, in reputation, in small community bonds. Money took that fragile, limited system and turned it into something transferable. Suddenly, trust could move between strangers, across cities, and eventually across the entire planet. Tonight, when you tap your card or transfer money with a single click, notice how little thought goes into it. That small, effortless motion represents thousands of years of solving one of humanity's oldest problems: how to cooperate and trade with people you'll never personally know and may never meet again. The paper, the metal, the numbers on your screen, none of it holds value on its own. The value was never in the object. It was always in the shared agreement between you and every stranger willing to accept it. That quiet agreement, repeated billions of times a day, across borders and generations, might be one of the most powerful forms of trust humans have ever invented.